Jurors, I know that you will try this case according to the oath that you took this morning. In that oath, you promised you would well and truly try the issues between the Commonwealth and the defendant according to the evidence and the law. If you follow that oath, approach this case with an open mind, and make your decisions fairly and without prejudice or bias or sympathy for anyone, then you will arrive at a just and fair verdict. It's now time for the opening statements. And you will find that there are customs in the law, many customs in the law that dictate how the case plays out. And the first custom I'll alert you to is that the Commonwealth opens the case first. ADA Connor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, may it please the court?
It does.
On January 4th, 2023, Teresa Marchese returned to work after New Year's holiday. She works at Tishman Speyer, and she is the Director of Human Capital Management. That is to say that she's the Director of Human Resources. And Tishman Speyer is a real estate management company, but it's a global real estate management company. It has buildings all over the world. And this office that Ms. Marchese works in is in Washington, D.C. When she returned to her office in Washington, D.C. that morning, she was alerted that one of her co-workers' husbands was trying to find her co-worker. The co-worker was Ana Walshe, and her husband is Brian Walshe. Teresa Marchese knew Ana Walshe because she hired her. She hired her in February 2022 to work at the Washington, D.C. office of Tishman Speyer and to manage some of those buildings in Washington, D.C. She also knew that Ana Walshe commuted from Cohasset to Washington to work at Tishman Speyer, and that her husband, Brian, and her 3 children were still in Cohasset at this time. She also knew where Ana Walshe lived in Washington, D.C. Ana Walshe had bought a townhouse right near where Teresa Marchese lives in Washington. So when she heard that Brian Walshe was looking for Ana, she got concerned. And she spoke to her boss, Jeff Chubb. And the two of them went into a conference room and called Brian Walshe. Brian was calm, and he said that on January 1st, Ana left their Cohasset home for a work emergency and had to fly back to Washington, D.C. And he hasn't spoken to her since then. This is the longest they've ever gone without speaking. So, Teresa Marchese went and drove to Ana Walshe's townhouse. She took another employee with her, and on the way there, she had another conversation with Brian Walshe. Brian was calm, and he gave her the combination to the garage so Ms. Marchese could get into the building. Ms. Marchese got there. She was able to look in the windows. Nothing was broken. Nothing was out of order. She got into the garage, and she found some cardboard boxes that had yet to be unpacked, some car seats, no car, no Ana Walshe. Now the door from the garage to the home, that was locked, so she couldn't get inside. So, Ms. Marchese called Mr. Walshe back again, and she told him that she was going to loop into this conversation Tishman Speyer's global head of security, who also works in Washington, D.C. His name is Hugh Dunleavy. He's a retired Secret Service agent. Mr. Walshe is calm. Mr. Dunleavy is looped into this conversation on the phone, and Mr. Walsh's demeanor changes. He becomes very upset. Mr. Dunleavy calms him down, asks him a series of questions, and Mr. Walshe repeats. Ana left the home in Cohasset on January 1st to come to Washington, D.C. for a work emergency. Mr. Dunleavy follows up. Have you called the police? What is the local police department in your town? You live in Cohasset. You need to call the police. The call ends. Mr. Dunleavy works with the Washington police and helps facilitate them getting into the home in Washington, D.C., and Ana is not there. He also calls the Cohasset police just before noon on January 4th. And he reports Ana missing. Hugh Dunleavy from Washington, D.C. calls the Cohasset police, and that is the first time Ana Walshe has been reported missing to the police. And it was done just before noon on January 4th. And no one has seen her since January 1st. Over the next few weeks, it'll be the honor of Ms. Cusick, Ms. Yaz, and myself to represent the Commonwealth. And in that time, we will prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the premeditated murder of his wife, Ana Walshe. And we're going to do that by presenting evidence. And evidence will come to you, as what Ana pointed out, in two different forms. One is kind of tangible. You'll see photos of the family home in Cohasset at 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. You'll see videos from different stores. You'll see Ana Walshe's banking records. You will also see objects, like a Tyvek suit, like a hatchet, like a hacksaw. Now, in addition to those objects, you will hear from witnesses. Witnesses like Teresa Martini and Hugh Dunleavy, who I just mentioned. You'll also hear from a group of witnesses that are Ana Walshe's friends and colleagues. They will tell you that Ana was 39 years old in January 2003. She was married to the defendant. She had 3 children. They'll tell you that she was a Serbian immigrant, that she came to this country and began working in the hospitality industry by working in hotels in Washington and Massachusetts, and that she transitioned to real estate. She got the opportunity to work for Jem Newton, who had his own real estate company. She actually wound up running that company for him. That was until February 2022, where she got what Brian Walshe referred to as a dream job, where she got to work for Titian Spire. And she would make more money than she had ever made before in her career. She had purchased a townhouse in Washington, D.C., and she was expecting to have her family come with her. However, Brian and the children had stayed in Massachusetts. And the reason is that Brian had previously pled guilty to a count of fraud in the Boston Federal District Courthouse. But he hadn't been sentenced yet. Now, he was accused of owing over $400,000 of restitution. At this point in time, Ana was the breadwinner for the family, and she had moved to D.C. She was still commuting back and forth, but looking to have the family join her in D.C. And Brian too. However, when she bought the townhouse, she did this with the aid of a person by a real estate agent by the name of William Fastow. She was introduced to Mr. Fastow from her former boss, Jem Newton. Mr. Fastow will testify. And he will tell you that they became friends, and that friendship became romantic. And that carried on into November of 2022, when Ana needed to go visit her mother, who was sick back in Belgrade, Serbia. Ana flew to Dublin, Ireland, the weekend of Thanksgiving, and Mr. Fastow joined her for that weekend. She then flew and visited her sick mother in Serbia, and then would return back to the United States. Mr. Fastow, after Dublin, would go back to Washington, D.C. But Ana missed Thanksgiving with Brian and the children. And then on Christmas Eve that same year, Ana went out to dinner with Mr. Fastow. They went out to dinner in Athens with another couple. And she stayed the night. And she was supposed to get a flight out on Christmas Day. But she couldn't get a flight. So she had to drive up from Washington, D.C. to Cohasset. And she missed Christmas Eve and most of Christmas Day with Brian. She would fly back to Washington, D.C. And on December 29th, she would go to dinner with one of her friends, who will testify before you. And that friend will say that she was uncharacteristically tired and emotional. You'll also hear from a series of witnesses that dealt with Ana Walshe right before New Year's. She returned back to Cohasset on December 30th, and she was going to stay with the family until January 3rd. You'll hear how she went to a barre class, B-A-R-R-E. It's an intensive ballet class. You'll hear from the instructor who will say that she did exceedingly well in that class. A person who was with her in a nail salon will testify. She got her nails done on New Year's Eve. And Mr. Mutlu will testify. He went over to the Walshe family residence on New Year's Eve for dinner. 3 adults were there. It was Mr. Mutlu, Brian, and Ana. He got there around 8:30. He brought some snacks for the kids. Actually got to play with the oldest child. And he spent the night talking to his friends. He'd characterize them as jovial. They shared champagne. They weren't drunk. They were enjoying the new year. They actually signed the champagne box. And you'll see that, where they were looking forward to the new year. Brian cooked. Brian was attentive. Brian also said to Mr. Mutlu that night that he had lost his phone, it had been misplaced, but he had felt free as a result of it. Mr. Mutlu left that home on New Year's Day at 1:30 a.m. And there was no mention of a work emergency in Washington, D.C. that would require Ana to fly out or leave the family home at 6 or 7 a.m. that day. Now on January 4th, after Hugh Dunleavy had called the Cohasset Police Department, the Cohasset Police Department dispatched Officer Greg Lawrence to go speak to Mr. Walshe at his home. Officer Lawrence went. He was met outside by Brian Walshe. Brian Walshe informed Officer Lawrence that Ana had left on January 1st, had taken an Uber or Lyft to Logan Airport to fly out to Washington, D.C. for a work emergency. Gave her a phone number for Ana Walshe, described her as 5'2", that she was 39 years old, approximately 115 pounds. He hadn't heard her. Officer Lawrence went back to the Cohasset Police Department, worked with other Cohasset police officers, trying to find any connection to Uber or Lyft or local taxi cabs. Cohasset police would then begin a process of pinging Ana's phone. You're going to get to see the records from that, but essentially the process involves the cell phone carrier, in this case Verizon, sending a signal out to the phone to try and locate it. And the Verizon records will show that the last time that phone that belonged to Ana Walshe interacted with the network was shortly after 3 a.m. on January 2nd. And when it did so, it was in the area of the Walshe home. That same day, Cohasset Police also tasked Detective Schmidt with investigating this case. He and Officer Lawrence would go back to the Walshe family residence at 516 Chief Justice Wilson Highway and interview Brian Walshe. And he recorded it. You'll get to hear the recording. And Brian will talk about how Ana was commuting back and forth from Cohasset to Washington for work, how there were some issues with his federal case, and how Mr. Mutlu had come over for dinner that night on New Year's Eve, and how Ana had to leave between 6 and 7 on January 1st. He also, in that interview, described what Ana was wearing when she left the home. Blue-gray hunter boots, a black jacket, and an Hermes watch. So Sergeant Smith will testify before you, and he will tell you that he worked on this missing person investigation and called in additional resources to help. On the 5th, he had his own department do a search of the woods near the family home. On the 6th, he called in a task force made of several different police departments to do further searching of the woods in and around the Walshe family home. Contacted the state police to use their resources. He also got the opportunity to speak to Mr. Walshe on January 5th, January 7th, and January 8th. And when he did those interviews, he was accompanied by detectives from the state police. And those interviews were recorded. And you'll get to hear those interviews. And Mr. Walshe, during those interviews, will explain that he and Ana were happily married. He had no knowledge of any extramarital affair. That Ana had her dream job. That it was taking care of the family. And conversely, he didn't take a salary this year out of his company that was a consulting company. He told the police that he owed over $400,000 in restitution on his federal matter. That this case was causing stress on his marriage. That he might have to go to jail. He said that they were very happy and that the biggest problem was that they were apart. Brian also told the police that Ana's job had caused her to miss Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with the family. And that Ana traveling to visit her sick mom caused her to miss Thanksgiving with the family. And that he did not want to have an argument with Ana about missing another holiday on January 1st. He had a discussion with her about Christmas Day. He was concerned that by him looking around trying to find her, that she embarrassed her. So he tells the police, I didn't want to have an argument. So I understood she was going to come back, and she left for that emergency at work. You'll also have access to financial records that will show that Ana Walshe had approximately $200,000 in accounts at Fidelity, and that there was over $1 million in life insurance in Ana Walshe, and that Brian Walshe was the beneficiary of those policies. And in addition to the Cohasset police, the Massachusetts State Police also worked with them on trying to find Ana. You're going to hear from two troopers in particular, Trooper Nicholas Torino and Trooper Connor Keith. They are digital forensic specialists. They have special training in examining computers, tablets, phones. And in this matter, they had the opportunity to examine a MacBook, iPads, and cell phones that were at the Walshe house. And they will explain that on Christmas Day, when Ana had missed Christmas Eve and was, after spending the evening with Mr. Passow, and was driving up from Washington, D.C., the cell phone that Brian Walshe was using looked up Mr. Passow on the internet. And that on December 27th, a MacBook that used the Apple ID for Brian Walshe, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, researched best strategies to divorce for a man, best state to divorce for a man, Washington, D.C. divorce laws. On December 29th, Brian Walsh's cell phone was researching buildings that Ana Walshe managed petitioners filed and emergencies she had handled for them in the past. Trooper Guarino will also explain to you the internet history of that MacBook that had Brian Walsh's Apple ID beginning on January 1st. At 4:54 a.m., the MacBook searched best way to dispose of a body. And then went to similar websites near the night. At 6:24 a.m., same day, the same device searched how long for someone to missing to inherit. How long missing to be dead? Can you throw away body parts? Later on that morning, on January 1st, at 9:33 a.m., the MacBook went to search how long does DNA last? And then an article. Is it possible to clean DNA off a knife? 30 minutes later, the MacBook researched disposal of his cell phone. At 10:28 a.m., the MacBook researched, I am the user of my wife's credit card. She is missing. And again, on January 1st, at 11:28 a.m., it searched, best way to dispose of body parts after a murder. Trooper Guarino will explain the numerous websites and searches done by the MacBook in the morning and early afternoon on January 1st, and that these websites were about cleaning blood with ammonia, bleach, and hydrogen peroxide. Websites visited included those as whether it is better to throw away crime scene clothes or wash them. One site was entitled, You Want to Get Away with Murder? Use a special deterrent. This type of activity on the MacBook continued into January 2nd, when it looked up, how long does Lowe's keep security footage? How to saw a body. How to dismember a body. Can you be charged with murder without a body? Can you identify a body with broken teeth? The MacBook also visited websites for apartment complexes in Brockton and Chelsea. One in particular, Chatham West in Brockton. Brian Walshe told investigators that his phone, which was an iPhone 13 mini, had been misplaced and not found until the afternoon of January 2nd, 2023. When investigators examined that phone, they learned that it had been connected to a power source. It had been unlocked 4 times by either using the face or the passcode. Investigators will also tell you that the location data from that phone showed that it remained in the Walshe residence until the afternoon of January 2nd, 2023. However, there was another phone in the Walshe residence, an iPhone SE, which belonged to one of the children. When investigators examined the location data from that phone, they found that on January 1st, the phone traveled to a Walgreens in Cohasset, then to a liquor store nearby the defendant's mother's home, an apartment complex in Swampscott, to a CVS in Danvers, to a Lowe's in Danvers, and to a Stop and Shop in Swampscott. You will see the surveillance video from those stores. You will see the video from Walgreens, where a white man with dark hair using a credit card buys Band-Aids and antibiotic. You'll see on the surveillance video at the CVS in Danvers that a white man with dark hair, now wearing a mask, buys hydrogen peroxide using cash. You'll see the surveillance video from the Stop and Shop in Swampscott, where a white man then goes buys ammonia with cash. And you'll see the surveillance video from the Lowe's in Danvers, where a white man wearing a mask and dark hair buys several items that cost more than $400 using cash, including a Tyvek suit and cutting instruments such as shears, snips, and a hacksaw. Investigators will explain how the cell phone location data from the iPhone SE shows that it went to a Home Goods in the morning of January 2nd, and that Brian's iPhone 13 mini went to a Home Depot in Rockland in the afternoon of January 2nd. You will see the surveillance videos from those stores. You'll see a white man with dark hair at Home Goods buying scented candles and area rugs. And you'll see a white man with dark hair at the Home Depot buying more cleaning supplies. 20 pounds of baking soda, mop, buckets, and a hatchet. The investigators will also explain to you that Brian Walshe's cell phone on January 3rd was located near apartment complexes in Reno. You'll see the surveillance video from some of those apartment complexes, including one of Chatham West. You'll see someone going to the dumpster and then leaving. The investigators will also tell you that on January 5th, Brian Walshe's phone was in the area of dumpsters and a trash compactor by his mother's apartment complex in Swampscott, and that this was before he was interviewed by Detective Schmidt later that night. On January 9th, the police went to those dumpsters, and they took that trash compactor and that dumpster to a facility in Peabody, where they searched the contents of both. And they found an Air Mary's watch, blue-gray hunter boots, a black coat, a COVID vaccination card with Ana Walshe's name on it, rugs, a Tyvek suit, a hammer, shears, snips, a hatchet, and a hacksaw. The police will tell you that these items were packaged and brought back to a laboratory, and they were brought there for examination. And how some of these items were examined for DNA. And the DNA was compared to samples they had from Ana and Brian. Scientists from the state DNA lab will identify DNA of Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe on the Tyvek suit. They will explain that Ana Walshe's DNA was found from items in the dumpster, including drugs, the hatchet, and the hacksaw. Jem Mutlu said goodbye to Ana Walshe about 1:30 a.m. on New Year's Day. When he left, she was home, she was alive, she was with her husband. No one has seen her since her husband said she left on January 1st. She has not accessed her finances, her email, her phone has made no calls, and no one has found her body. During this case, we ask two things. The first is that you keep an open mind. Do not rush to judgment, but instead, see how all the evidence fits together. Pay careful attention to the timing of certain events. And second, use your common sense. Don't leave it home. Bring it with you here as you make your examination of every piece of evidence. And at the end of this trial, we will speak to you one more time. And it is at that time we will ask that you find the defendant guilty of murdering his wife with deliberate premeditation. Thank you.
Thank you, ADA Connor. Jurors, why don't you take a break and stand up, shake a leg. And when you're comfortable and have regained your focus, you may be seated. Now we'll hear from the defense for the opening statements. Attorney Tipton.
Thank you, Ana. Brian Walshe lied to the police. Lied to him on January 4th, lied to him on January 5th, lied to him on January 7th. Brian Walshe went to Lowe's and bought tools. Brian Walshe went to Home Depot and bought tools. Brian Walshe, beginning about 4:54 a.m., began a frantic and tragic search that you will hear about. You'll hear the evidence of that. You will hear evidence that those searches evolved from how best to dispose a body to even darker subject matter. As he wrestled with the fact that Ana Walshe was dead. That evidence that you will hear will be hard to understand, but it is true. On January 1st of 2023, Jim Mutlow left the family home of Brian and Ana Walshe sometime between 1 and 1:30 in the morning. Ana and Brian Walshe continued to celebrate the New Year's. They went upstairs to the bedroom. About an hour later, you'll hear evidence that Mr. Walshe got up, went back down the stairs to clean the kitchen. You'll see evidence that he looked at his email. You'll hear evidence that he then returned to the bedroom, intending nothing more than to crawl into bed with Ana Walshe, the woman he loved. When he entered the bedroom and began to get into the bed, he sensed something was wrong. You will hear evidence that it made no sense to him. But he nudged Ana, his wife. She didn't respond. He nudged her again, a little harder. She didn't respond. He nudged her now in a frantic and panic reaction to where she actually rolled off the bed. You'll hear evidence that now he is panicking and he doesn't understand what has happened and what is happening. It didn't make any sense to him. It didn't make sense that somebody that he had just been with and enjoyed New Year's Eve into New Year's Day would suddenly be dead. Not answer. You will hear evidence in this case of sudden, unexplained death. You will hear evidence that it is rape. You will hear evidence that it happens in young people and old. You will hear evidence it happens in male and female. You will hear evidence it happens during the day and during the night, that it happens to trained athletes. You will hear evidence that it can be the result of both mechanical and or electrical problems within the body. You will hear evidence that it might be cardiovascular, pulmonary, neurological, or other reasons. You will hear evidence that it occurs in people who have never manifested a symptom that something might be wrong. And in fact, you will hear evidence that sometimes the first manifestation that something is or was wrong with someone is the sudden, unexplained. That's the evidence you will hear from this. Sudden, unexplained death is known within the medical community and the forensic community. But it is to this day not well understood, and that is the evidence you will hear. And it is not well known to non-medical professionals. And you will hear evidence Brian Walshe never imagined somebody suddenly die. 1 hour he's with her, he cleans the kitchen, he comes back up, and she is dead. You will hear evidence in this case that Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe loved each other. Yes, there was stress in the marriage. Stress born out of a simple problem that took its toll. And that's the pending federal case that had begun in 2018 and was still going forward. And what happened was, over time, Ana Walshe got a job in D.C. with the support of Brian Walshe. It was a huge stepping stone in her career. It paid twice the salary. And they talked about it. And you will hear evidence that they had to make a decision. Brian could not leave Cohasset because of the pending federal case. So who would take care of the children? Well, Ana worked in D.C. Brian worked. And he did. There was stress in commuting back and forth between D.C. and Cohasset. Brian Walshe experienced that stress too. And Ana Walshe and him they talked about it on Christmas Day of 2022. And that's what the evidence will be. Yes, there was an affair. You will hear evidence of an affair. An affair does not make someone a bad person, does not make someone a bad mother. Make no mistake about that. But yes, there was an affair. Not between Brian Walshe and anyone, but between Ana Walshe and William Best. The evidence in this case will be that Ana Walshe did everything she could to hide that affair. That she did not tell her closest friends, her confidants, some of whom lived in D.C., the same person, Alyssa Kirby, that she spent December 29th with, drinking and talking about her life. She hid the affair. William Fassler will tell me that he was unaware of any plans of Ana ever telling Brian about the affair. William Fassler will testify that they behaved differently in public in D.C. to make sure there was no appearance of the affair. William Fassler will testify that Ana Walshe told him she would be devastated if Brian ever learned about the affair. Brian Walshe didn't know about the affair. He did know. Ana Walshe had a crush on William Fassler because she told him. And he did not react in a jealous way. And you will hear evidence that over the close to decade that these two people were in love, and all you have to do is look at the evidence and the photograph you'll see of Ana Walshe. And the evidence will establish she is a beautiful woman. And it was not unusual for her to comment to Brian. I had some man look at me today. I think he liked her. That didn't upset Brian, not over a period of 10 years. And when she told him that she had a crush on William Fassler, the man who had sold them the $1.3 million townhouse in D.C., it didn't upset Brian. He trusted her. In fact, you will hear evidence from Alyssa Kirby that Ana Walshe told her, I wish you would be jealous. You will hear evidence that there was no financial issues or problems. Ana Walshe had just got that job in the early part of 2022 that paid close to $300,000 a year. They owned that townhouse in D.C. It was worth over $1 million. They owned whole life insurance policies on their sons in the amount of $1 million each. Whole life that you will hear you can borrow against if you need cash. You will hear evidence that Brian Walshe's mother gifted them money, and actually you'll hear from the landlord of the home that they were living in at the time, that Brian was living in, taking care of the three boys, while Ana worked in D.C., that it was his mother who was paying the rent, because that's what grandmothers do. There was no financial problems here. They owned investment property in Massachusetts. The evidence in this case is that Brian Walshe loved Ana Walshe. You will hear that she spoke of him in glowing terms to William Fassett. That she said, I want people to see the Brian that I know. You will hear how she talked about her relationship with Brian with Alyssa Curry. And notwithstanding the fact that Ana Walshe was having an affair, she described their relationship as open and honest. He believed their marriage was open and honest because he loved her. You will hear how she described Brian as her best friend to her friend Alyssa Curry. You will also see evidence of text messages that you may use to determine for yourself if there was love between these two individuals. The importance about those text messages that you'll see is simply that they're dated. The ones you'll see are dated beginning December 25th of 2022, 7 days before New Year's Day. 12:25, Ana Walshe and Brian Walshe are texting each other, and she is sending him 7 properties, listings, primarily out of Zillow, 7 listings of properties in the greater D.C. area, Bethesda, Annapolis. They're searching for future investment property. You'll see that, and you'll hear evidence that then she comes up to celebrate Christmas with Brian and their 3 beautiful boys. You'll see on 12/27, now that she's back in D.C., these text messages between them. And they're talking about one of their properties. And they're talking about the fact that it, in fact, sold. So now they need to figure out what to do with the proceeds. You'll see on 12/28, next exchange between Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe. Now, she's back in D.C. She's not feeling well. She's telling Brian, I don't feel well. So I'm going to stay at home and work at home today in D.C. And they joke. And on the text, Brian says something like, well, I guess I'll have to get you a plunger. And Ana responds, I'll tell you what. I'll buy the plunger. You buy me that Porsche. Why? Because Ana Walshe wanted a Porsche. And what you see on that text exchange, right after she says that, is you'll see postings that he sent to her of the Porsches he'd been shopping for the women he loved. And you'll see in his network that he was shopping for Porsches because she had asked for one. On 12/29, you'll see a text exchange between them where they're talking about a 3-story brownstone that she had found that maybe they'll buy for an investment. And you'll see the text references to how much it cost, the square footage it's up and below. You'll see text exchange between them where they're talking about possible renovations in the future. They are talking about the future. And this is on 12/29. And then on 12/30, simple texts between them about her catching her flight from D.C. to get to Cohasset for New Year's. She texts him, I've landed. You know what you see in those text messages? She begins to send Brian pictures of her playing with the boys, now that she's reunited with the 3 beautiful boys again. And then you see 7 pictures sent by Brian Walshe back to Ana, taken of her playing with the boys. And how do they sign off these texts? You'll see them. Brian says, love you. And Ana Walshe says, love you too. We've come full circle in this opening, and now we're back to New Year's Eve. And Jim Mutlow, the family friend, is invited by Ana to come to the house to celebrate New Year's Eve. You'll hear evidence that he was thrilled. He was thrilled to be with two people he'd known for years, but he hadn't seen in some time. He knew their kids, 3 beautiful boys. He'll describe how when he drove up in the driveway, Ana Walshe ran down the driveway in her heels, no coat, on a cold winter day to hug him. And then what happened? They all went into the house. And what was occurring in the house? Brian was cooking. New Year's. He was feeding them as they all talked for 4 to 5 hours. And what were they talking about? They were talking about the future. They were talking about investments. Ana Walshe told a story about how Brian had found a ring for her and the whole adventure of finding the ring and buying the ring. And she talked about it in glowing terms when she talked about how Brian did that. Mr. Mutlow will describe that for the 4 or 5 hours that he was there, he saw no problems between them. Said that Brian was happy and Ana was happy. He described the atmosphere as jovial, festive. He described it as loving. As adults do for New Year's Eve, they celebrated with wine and champagne. You will have that box, or at least photographs of that champagne box, where they signed it. And what Ana signed on that box she wrote, "Let's make 2023 the best one yet." She went on to say, courage, love, perseverance, compassion, joy, and signed it, love. Nothing was more important to both Ana and Brian but those 3 beautiful boys. They had talked about the problem of the federal case. It was stressful. When you heard in the Commonwealth opening the reference to a divorce search, please understand that the other evidence will be that that singular search occurred between conversations between Ana and Brian about the sale of their property. You'll see that that search occurred about 8:30 on 12/27. And why is that important? The evidence will show that the only time Ana Walshe talked about divorce with William Fastow, she talked about it in terms of Brian and I attempting to preserve the family assets. Why is that important? Because yes, there was $400,000 of restitution that was going to come due. And yes, Brian may have had to go to prison for some time. And what did that mean? It meant that there was going to have to be arrangements, not just to pay the money, which wasn't going to be a problem, but the boys had to move up to D.C. because Brian could no longer take care of them. And there would be all that added expense. And they went so far as to talk to Robin Howe, their nanny, their babysitter, and asked her if she would consider moving up. So there were expenses. So when you talk about preserving the family assets, you have to decide, how is it that I make sure, how is it, as Brian Walshe will tell you, how is it that I make sure that my wife and my 3 sons are financially secure if I have to go to prison? For a day, for a week, for a month, or for a year. That's what they were talking about. And in all of the other digital data that the Commonwealth has been poring over for 2 years, you will not hear evidence of any other conversation about divorce. And you won't hear it from William Fastow. In fact, William Fastow will tell you he had resigned himself to think Ana Walshe was never going to be Brian's father of the children. Jim Mutlow left around 1:30. Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe went upstairs. He went back down to the kitchen about an hour later to clean it up. And then the impossible, the unimaginable. It didn't make sense to Brian Walshe. It was confusing. He never thought anybody would believe that Ana Walshe was alive 1 minute and dead the next. And all he could think about were those 3 boys. What would happen to their 3 boys now that Ana is no longer here? What will happen if they think he did something bad to Ana? Where will those 3 boys go? And so, he told the story. He told lies. He tried to hide so he could hang on to those boys. Brian Walshe never killed him. Brian Walshe never thought about killing him. Never. Think about it. Brian Walshe is not guilty.
Jurors, once again, why don't you stand up? Shake a leg. About 15 minutes before the break, but it's been a long little stretch here, so I can either break you now or we can start the evidence. Does anybody just a show of hands need a bathroom break? Okay, hold on for 15. All right, we're going to take a break early, and we'll see you back in about 20 minutes.
All rise for the court, please.
What is that?
On the rope.
Mm-hmm.